Hello all, welcome to Samvad Talks. I am Shalini Singh, a student volunteer with IIITB Branding Committee, and I'll be introducing the speaker and the talk of the day. The current theme for Samvad Talk is Technologies by and for Social Organization. Kickstart talks in this theme with a talk by Professor Sachit Rao today, titled Swarm Robotics. Professor Sachit Rao is an assistant professor at IIIT Bangalore. He obtained his master's and PhD degrees in mechanical engineering from Ohio State University. His specialization in the area of control system and theory with an emphasis on sliding mode control. He has over 3 years of postdoctoral experience working in the areas of control of electric machines, swarm of dynamic agents, and guidance laws for tactical interceptors. He also has 3 years of industrial experience working for an Indian robotics company prior joining to IIITB. He was a faculty in the Aerospace Engineering Department of Jain University for a year. His research interests are in control system and robotics. He is also advising students in other domains such as classification, event history analysis, visual surveying, with the focus of using control theory in these varied areas of research. Today, Professor Sachit will be talking about an algorithm that enables a swarm of unicycle robots to fill a polygonal shape autonomously. This work was presented as an extended abstract in EMAS 2020. He will be presenting some silent features results on a sliding mode control algorithm for consensus in multi-agent system, where some of the dynamic agents are Byzantine or malicious. This work was done in collaboration with Professor Srisha Rao and has been recently accepted as an extended abstract in EMAS 2021. EMAS is one of the most influential conferences in the area of agents and multi-agent systems. He will also be showing us a few exciting demonstrations of Indo Robotics Studio in the Minro Center, along with the future direction of research. Also take this moment to thank our wonderful audience at Samvad Talks. As always, feel free to ask your questions in chat box as the talk progresses. We'll take the question at the end of the talk. Thank you for your cooperation as always. Now, I'll request Professor Sachit to start the talk.
Thanks, Shalini, for the nice introduction. Good afternoon and welcome to everybody. I see there are about 29 people in the audience today. I hope you have had not a very heavy lunch and don't fall asleep. I'll be briefly talking about some work that we have done in the broad area of swarm robotics. This in itself has many challenges, and I'll just be briefly talking about some of the problems that we've been looking at. This is in collaboration with a few RAs and a few colleagues, a few faculty colleagues. So broadly, we'll be looking at three topics. One is an algorithm for autonomous shape formation. So we'll be looking at how a bunch of autonomous robots can actually fill a polygon. This is in contrast with formation control problems in swarm robotics, which have usually been addressed. So there, the robots are controlled in such a way that they form the sides of a polygon, say like a triangle or a square or something. Now, when it comes to filling a shape, there are several issues that arise. One of primary is main one is collision avoidance. So how do we ensure that the robots don't collide with each other while they fill the shape? And then there are also some issues with localization, sensing, and so on. Another challenge that we have found while we worked on this algorithm are the issues of live locks and deadlocks. So it could happen that two robots may just keep hunting around a point and never actually reach a place where they come to a stop and they form the shape. So there are some challenges in this particular problem. The next problem is again broadly in the area of consensus. So I'll be discussing one problem that we've that we looked at. Again, this is from a paper that I had found on the internet, where they were trying to fuse robotics and art. So I will be presenting some results in that domain and the implementation of some of these algorithms in the experimental domain as well. Then I'll be looking at another problem, which is again in the domain of consensus, where some of the agents become malicious. Now, of late, this has received some interest in the academic domain, where if you have a multi-agent system, some of them may become hacked, and so if they become hacked and then they start sending out junk information, what happens to the overall consensus behavior of the swarm. So again, some preliminary results here, and then we've actually moved on to developing other results as well. The third one is some demonstrations in the robotics studio that we have in the Minro Center in the institute. So we'll be looking at pattern formation, which is the same problem that we looked at here in terms of geometric patterns. So we actually have implemented this with 2 drones and 1 ground robot. I'll also be briefly introducing the studio to those of you who may not have seen it, and to the audience who are outside of IIIT Bangalore. We'll also be looking at some demonstrations which would be extended to the main problem of area coverage. How do you get 2 or 3 autonomous agents to cover an area in a 2D plane, say with minimal movements, or when you have several of them, how can we coordinate them in such a way that they spend as little time in covering the area as possible? And then we also have some experimental results of implementing a collision avoidance algorithm, but with a limited field of view. So there are some assumptions that are made in existing collision avoidance algorithms, and we are trying to question them and see if we can come up with alternatives. I'll try to be fairly brief in many of these discussions, and I don't have access to the chat window. So if anyone wants to ask a question, please go ahead and unmute yourselves and ask. No problem. And I'd rather have some time for discussion than me talking about it. Okay, so let's get to the first one, which is that of shape formation. So here we have the main problem is that we have numerous robots, and we want them to form and maintain a specified shape. So a shape could be so we define a shape as a polygon. This could be a concave or a convex polygon. We don't impose any constraints there. We only at this point we have results for solid polygons, which means that there are no holes within the polygon. So for instance, if you have a square or a triangle, we assume that there are no vacant spaces within that. So we also extend this algorithm to enable the swarm to actually morph between shapes. So a square can become a triangle and vice versa, and also reform the shape in different locations. So suppose there are some obstacles that the swarm which has formed the shape has to navigate between, then it can actually reform the shape in a different location. So again, we emphasize on developing this algorithm only using localized communication. So there is no centralized server that actually tells each robot to go here or there. So they only with local interactions with again limited range that they're able to actually form the shape. Of course, at the beginning of the shape formation, there is one centralized entity which actually informs these robots that these are the coordinates of the shape. So these are the vertices. These are the geometric properties of the shape that have to be formed. And then the algorithm that we propose has a parallel approach. So this is something that we'll be looking at. Again, there are several applications: coordinated object carrying, or presumably in defense applications where a swarm of robots have to surround valuable asset in some way. So I'm sure there are various applications that can be found. So this paper was accepted as an abstract in AMAS 2020, as was also told to you in the introduction. So this is my co-author Vaibhav, who is currently an RA with the Monroe Center. Yeah. So this algorithm basically has 2 main steps. There is a shape processing step, which is something that I'll come to in the next slide. And then there is a state machine based behavior, which defines the states of the robot so that they are able to form the shape. So we define 4 main behaviors. So there's localization, coalesce, and I'll briefly describe what all these states are. Localization, coalesce, edge following, and inactive. And then this is the state transition diagram that you see here. So there are also extensions that are possible. As I told you, an additional signal can be provided so that a shape that is formed by the swarm can actually be changed, can be morphed into something else. All these are the switching conditions to go from one state to the other, and we'll briefly discuss those. So this is the shape. Assume that this is a shape that has to be formed. It's a solid polygon, so there are no holes in between. So in order to introduce some parallelism into the algorithm, we actually break the polygon up into triangles. Now, these are well-known triangulation algorithms. I'm sure many of you are familiar with them. So the information that is actually conveyed to each of the robots prior to their shape formation are the coordinates of these vertices, which are again defined in a global reference frame or with respect to a particular origin robot or some location. I mean, they need to know, everything needs to have some basis. Performing these, triangulating the polygon is what lends it the parallel approach. And in addition to that, we define what are called the formation points, which are these black dots that you see here on the figure. Now, these basically become targets to the target locations to which the robots have to navigate. So it's basically these features that that lend parallelism to the algorithm. So the robots could be distributed anywhere in this environment, and they autonomously have to come and fill up the shape. I'll show you some demos on how this algorithm actually behaves. So we make some assumption about the robots. We say that they're homogeneous, that they can be bounded within a circle, like geometrically, they can be bounded within a circle of a particular radius, and then several other, and each of them has these sensors that it can detect other robots in its vicinity in all directions, or it has a 360-degree view of where the other robots are. They can also communicate with each other. So these are some standard assumptions that people make anyway in the swarm robotics behavior. So we don't emphasize too much on how the sensing is implemented. We provide some suggestions on the type of sensors that may be feasible. We don't necessarily say that it has to be vision, or it has to be ultrasound, or light, or infrared. We only say that there are these sensors that are available that will allow us to communicate, that allows the robots to communicate amongst each other. So this is the first behavior, which is called localization. So here it simply means that the coordinate frames of the two robots of one robot has to align itself with an origin robot. So once we define a coordinate frame for the origin robot, the vertices of the shape that we had looked at in the earlier slide are also defined with respect to this particular coordinate frame. And we only say that these coordinate frames have to be aligned with each other. So there is basically a shift that this angle has to be determined by each robot. So it just has to align its coordinate frame with an angle beta I in order that the frames are aligned. They don't have to, the origins don't have to coincide. For that, we have simple transformation, homogeneous transformation matrices that allow us to perform these computations. But what is essential here is that they're aligned, so that the heading angles and the vertices are all in the same in the same reference frame. So we say that in order to accomplish this localization behavior, we can use an IR range and bearing sensor. So imagine a circle, imagine the robot being defined by a circle of some particular radius, and we can have an array of these sensors mounted at regular intervals on the circumference of the robot. And then we also know the ID of each of these individual sensors within the robot itself. And so based on this information, saying that I'm sending a signal, say, so I would broadcast a signal radially outward through all the sensors, saying that this is my ID and this is where I am. And then it would once this robot comes within the sensing range of the origin robot, it would also pick up a signal from a particular sensor. So a sensor could be mounted at this angle with respect to its own reference frame. And once it receives a signal at this angle, then it knows some of these parameters, and so it is able to align itself. So again, of course, here we make some assumptions about how the agents are cooperative and so on. And later in the presentation, we'll also see what happens when some of them are malicious. But of course, that's not a shape formation algorithm, but we look at, but presumably it can be extended to that as well. So what I mean here is that if you have n agents which are trying to form a shape, but suppose few of them are hacked, and then they behave in a different way, then can we still guarantee some shape formation, or would this robot impede the others from forming a shape? So these are again maybe questions that we can look at moving ahead. So the other three states, which is where the robots actually move. So this is what we term as the Coaley state. So here the robots basically move to the formation point, those black circles that had shown in the polygon before. So in order to navigate to these points while avoiding collisions with other robots, we use the so-called reciprocal velocity algorithm. This is a well-known algorithm that has been published in the robotics literature. So it can be very easily understood in the following lines. So suppose there are two robots. Say there are two robots in a head-on collision. So the modified HRVO algorithm basically asks the robot to move mutually in opposite directions to each other. So the load of moving away from the collision path is equally shared between the robots. Again, there are some mathematical transformations that have to be performed in the velocity space in order to calculate what should be the new direction of each of the robots in order that they avoid collisions. But these are fairly standard results, and this algorithm can also handle uncertainties in sensing. So we can define some bounds on the error, the deviation between potential collisions that can happen depending on the properties of the sensor noise and characterizing those properties. But it's a fairly well-known algorithm. But in the particular case that we have here, there are some challenges that we've had to overcome. So the HRVO algorithm in its current form cannot be used for the shape formation algorithm, simply because there could be robots that are navigating to the same formation point. So the HRVO needs a target location for each of the robots to navigate to. But suppose two robots are moving to the same formation point, and they happen to be in a symmetric configuration. So this is what we said about live locks. So if two robots are symmetrically located about the same formation point, and each of them has to go there, then a live lock a live lock behavior could occur, where the robots simply keep avoiding each other but never ultimately reach their destination points. So we've had to make some modifications to the existing HRVO algorithm in order to address this particular issue. So for the HRVO algorithm, as is written here, the algorithm needs needs the states of the robots that are in its vicinity. It needs to know the position and the velocities of the other robots. Maybe it can be estimated using onboard sensors, but this information needs to be known. The other important one is the shape of the robot itself. So typically, what is done in the robotics community is that we draw a circle of a certain radius around the robot. I mean, you can't expect all robots to be perfect circles. Maybe they're irregularly shaped. Maybe a robot has a manipulator, so its shape or its volume in space can be time varying, but they can always be bounded by some well-known figure. So in this case, we are looking at planar motions. So the shapes that are being formed are essentially in the 2D plane. So we bound the robot by a circle of a particular radius r. So since all robots are homogeneous, they all have the same radius. So the next state is what we call as edge following. Again, this particular state has been used in other shape formation algorithms. So here, basically, what happens is that the robots move in a procession until they are able to enter the shape boundary. So suppose there are already some robots that have begun to form the shape. Now there may be robots that are outside it, which somehow have to enter it. So in this case, what the robots do is they switch to this particular state, and then they keep following the boundary until such time that they're able to reach it. Of course, you may ask, well, what happens if they're never able to? So this is where we pose this is where we have an additional feature of where the robot can form additional shapes if need be. So depending on the geometry of the robots and the size of the polygon, it may happen that we may have many more robots than what are needed to fill the shape. So in such case, the excess robots can actually be tasked with forming another algorithm for another shape in a different location. So these are again some challenges that we can overcome. So the edge following algorithm actually uses a different collision avoidance algorithm. It uses what is called as the velocity obstacle algorithm, which is again the HRVO is a, how should we say, is an extension of the basic VO algorithm. So the HRVO algorithm was developed in order to avoid those oscillatory or the live lock behaviors. But we find that in shape formation, even with those removed, we can have additional live lock behaviors. So the main VO algorithm would cannot guarantee the absence of these oscillations. But in this particular case, in the edge following state, it is sufficient for us to use this the VO algorithm rather than the HRVO algorithm. So the main idea to actually form to even come up with this algorithm, how should we say, an analogy from real life, is how water fills up a container. So water fills up when you pour water into a container, it fills up from bottom up, and this is what our motivation was before to propose this algorithm. So is it possible for us to ensure that the robots fill up the shape from bottom up in a particular way? in order that the shape is formed. The last state, of course, is the inactive state. We need to prove this. Otherwise, how will we know that the shape has actually been formed and the robots actually come to a stop? So here again, we are able to define some conditions based on the states of the robot on when a particular robot can actually reaches this inactive state and stops moving. So only when all the robots are in the inactive state do we say that the shape is formed, and we can provide some theoretical guarantees on this that the robots do indeed become inactive, and we are able to guarantee that a shape can be formed. Again, there are several nitty-gritty details that I have omitted here, primarily with respect to what sort of data should be exchanged between the two robots. So apart from sending the position coordinates and maybe its shape and uh, the vertices of the polygon that has to be filled, the robot also has to let the other let the other robots know what its current state is. Right? It should say that am I inactive, am I edge following, am I in the Coley state. So it has to transmit quite a bit of information, and but we feel that they can be overcome with the existing hardware that we have. And so this is the main summary of the shape formation algorithm. So here is a picture that tells us how some of the robots could actually be in motion. So this is what we mean by the inactive robot. So these are exactly those formation points that I defined in the polygon before. So a robot has actually navigated, and then it has come here and switched to the inactive state. So it's not going to move anymore. And so this is another robot which could either be in the coalesce or in the edge following state. And so it navigates around these inactive robots in order to fill up the shape. And what I was telling you about the shape being formed, like how water fills up in a container. So robots entering from the top are always constrained to move in a particular direction in order to have consistency. So these are many fixes that we actually had to propose in order that we are able to show completeness of the shape formation algorithm. And it's been interesting work to demonstrate all these theoretical guarantees. So there are additional features as well that this algorithm possesses. So so a robot can form multiple shapes. It can also morph between two shapes. So again, there are some technical notations here on how a robot can form multiple shapes. So there are these vertices that are defined, and once a robot which is not able to fill up one shape can actually go and start filling up another one. Here I have some videos on the operation of this particular algorithm. So so this is a shape that has to be formed. These are the formation points as a result of triangulation. And so these are the robots. So I'd like to just pause here for a second and then say that, so we don't impose any constraints on the original distribution of the robots. So there are many shape formation algorithms that say that the initial distribution has to be in a very specific way, or they have to be constrained to a particular area. We remove those constraints. We say that the robots can be distributed anywhere, of course, within the working environment. I mean, I don't mean unrealistic distributions, but we don't impose any specific geometric distributions on the initial positions of the robot. So they can be anywhere within the working environment. So in the and you'll see how the robots actually behave in the while they fill up the shape. So this is the just 1 second here. So for this particular video, we have assumed that the robots have all localized themselves. So they all have the same coordinate frame. And in the first behavior, so some of them you can see that some of them are in the vicinity of these black points. And so they actually become inactive at that particular location. So now the other robots could again be in different states. So they could, initially they would all be trying to move towards the same formation point because that's the state that they are in. And then only when certain conditions are satisfied, which you'll see in the video, do they switch to the other states. So this is the Coley state as the text is written. And so the robots, again, you can observe that the robots are actually able to not collide with each other. So this is what the collision avoidance algorithms based on the velocity obstacle paradigm ensure us this particular behavior. So they're still in the, so here you can see that some of the robots have actually begun to form the boundaries of the shape. And then there are some of the other robots that you can see here, that these robots are beginning to move in a procession. So this is the edge following state. So they move along the boundary of the algorithm in order to fill up the shape. So this was, the simulations were performed in the ROS and the Gazebo environments. And then we assume that these are your typical differential drive robots, for which the kinematics are well known. Again, there are many things that are that have not made visible. How do we control the position or the velocity or the heading angle? So we assume that there are internal controllers that allow us to do this. So we are looking at a more top level algorithm on how these autonomous robots can actually fill up the shape. So this is when we say that the shape is actually formed. Some statistics on the time taken, depending on the number of formation points that we have. We of course provided improved the theoretical guarantees on the time complexity and the algorithm complexity in order to establish some properties. So of course, I mean, maybe if we had had more robots here, we could have filled in these interstitial gaps. But then that, as maybe some of you are familiar with, that is more of a packing problem. So perhaps this algorithm could also be extended to a packing problem where we know exactly the orientation or the position that each robot has to go to in order to efficiently fill up a shape. Yeah. Okay. So this was a demonstration on shape formation. So here we have another demonstration on reforming a shape from between one location and the other. Let me just pause this. This give you some context before the video starts. So here you can see that the robots originally have formed a square shape. These are two static obstacles, and what we now say is that the robots have to pass through these obstacles and then form another shape at the end. So I'll leave it to you to guess the final shape that is formed, and hopefully your estimate will be as what we thought it would be. So again, here the robot switch to the states that are needed. They're also able to overcome the static obstacles and and other members in the swarm in order to reform the shape in another location. So the collision avoidance algorithms that we've used, both the VO and its variants, allow us to handle any type of obstacle. It can be static, it can be dynamic. The only constraints are that we need to have some idea about the shape of the geometric properties of the obstacle. So in this case, we are bounding it by a circle of a particular radius. The members of the swarm themselves have a particular geometric property. So these need to be known or estimated for us to implement the velocity obstacle algorithms. So again, here you can see that some of them are stuck, but they're still able to find their way out of these out of these areas and then begin to form the shape. So I hope you can convince yourself that these robots have formed a triangle in the other location. So all we need to inform the robots are the coordinates of the. So for in this case, we ask it to form a triangle. So we just need to tell the robot the vertices of the triangle, which should be in the new location. So this is all the robots need to know. And so amongst themselves, based on the algorithm that has been proposed, they are able to navigate there while avoiding collisions with each other. And so let me just let the video play. Yeah, so here so this is the edge following state, again, because they're not able to enter the shape here. And finally, they are they all switch to the inactive state, and then this is when we say that the shape has been formed. Okay, so that was about the shape formation algorithm, the first set of problems that I'll be discussing here. The second one is a broader problem in that of consensus. So maybe some of you are familiar with this problem. I'm sure people who work in computer science have or know about consensus, the Byzantine general problem, which has been studied, I think, in the 70s. But here because we are controls people, we are engineers. We are not computer scientists. We are engineers. We introduce dynamics into the system. We say that why should we restrict consensus to computer processors? We can have consensus between robots, like what you just saw. Now, unfortunately, robots, being engineering systems, have dynamics that are associated with them. So in this case, of course, we are simplifying the dynamics to be of this form. So an agent can have multiple states, and each of them has its own unique control input. So this is a state which could again be, say, its position or its velocity. If you're looking at mechanical systems, maybe there are, if you're looking at thermal systems, maybe they have their own states, or hydraulic systems could have their own states and their own inputs. And now the problem, and the main consensus problem, as I'm sure some of you are familiar with, are basically to design the inputs such that the states of the system are the same. The states of each of the agents reaches the same value. So this is the main basic consensus problem. And of course, here we say that the input should be selected. The input should be designed only based on local information, only based on local interactions. There is no centralized server that is telling them that this should be the input, reach this value, and so on. So it's only based on local interactions should they reach a consensus. So here we see a multi-agent system, which can be basically defined by a connected graph. So the lines between agents denote how information can be exchanged between these agents. So for example, here A1 and A5 are connected. So A1 and A5 can communicate with each other directly and then exchange information as is needed. I mean, again, here there are some assumptions that we make, that maybe they're all over the same network, or they're all within some sensing range, or maybe they can communicate through other media. So we abstract those behaviors out, and then we simply say that agents A1 and A5, or any agents between which you can draw a line, they can exchange information with each other. Of course, this is a graph where we don't denote the direction of information flow. I'm sure colleagues who work in graph theory are familiar with, very well know about the different types of graphs that can be identified depending on the topology of the graph. So we can, so suppose we were to draw a line, an arrow beginning from A5 and ending in A3. So the head of the arrow is A3, which means that A3 can only read information from A5. A5 cannot get information from A3. Now these would impose some constraints on how a consensus protocol can be developed if we want consensus when we're looking at dynamic agents. So the problem that we are looking at here is when some of these agents become malicious or Byzantine. Okay, and then we also say that we don't know which of the agents has become Byzantine, or where they are, who their neighbors are. So suppose I'm I'm an agent in this multi-agent system. I won't know whether in the information that I'm receiving from my neighbors, is it originating from a cooperative agent, or is it originating from a malicious agent? So standard consensus protocols that have been published so far make some assumptions about graph robustness. So they make some assumptions, they define some properties on the graph topology, on the graph robustness, and then they guarantee that if the graph topology is of this type, and there are so many number of malicious agents, then we can come up with a consensus protocol that will guarantee consensus even in the presence of these multiple malicious agents. So we say, can we somehow not make these assumptions, right? That was our main motivation. And so that was the main problem. So before that, I like to show you something a little different on the creation of geometric patterns, which is a very interesting consensus problem that I found from this paper, Tsiotras and Castro. And the title of the book is also very interesting. It says Controls and Art, published in 2014. Of course, I managed to get one chapter. I should perhaps get this book and read the other material that has been presented on it. So here we again have a multi-agent system, quite similar to what we had seen before. It's just that here we now have constraints on where the information is, how the information is flowing. So you can see that the edges are directed. So this is a directed graph, and A1 and A3, because there is no edge between them, they cannot communicate with each other. And here we say that the dynamics of the agents are like this. So there are two states and two independent inputs. So again, these are not my results. So these are results that have been published in this particular textbook chapter. You're more than welcome to please read it. It's very interesting, and I'll show you some results moving ahead. So in order to come up with a consensus protocol by which some geometric patterns can be created, there are these matrices that we can define. So this is incidence matrix. This is of dimension which is equal to the number of agents and the number of edges. So here you can see that this is a 3 by 2 matrix. So the 3 corresponds to the number of agents and 2 are the number of edges that we have in the graph associated with the matrix. Again, +1, -1 denotes which is the tail of the edge and the head of the edge. So here there is a consensus matrix. I mean, this is my terminology, just for simplicity, really. So this is a simple diagonal matrix. Beta 1, beta 2, beta 3 are real numbers. They can be positive or negative. And if we select the inputs in this way, so U is basically the vector of inputs of all the agents, and X similarly are all the states in the vector form, and we define the control input in this way. This is of course a Kronecker product. I mean, this may look very this may not look intuitive at all, but when we actually expand them, we find that there are some very simple underlying rules for consensus that will lead to creation patterns. The Kronecker product is merely used to express these inputs in a compact form. Let me show you some illustrations on what I actually mean here by geometric patterns. So here we have these 3 agents. So we have 3 robots here, which are starting in some space. So this is again planar pattern. So here we assume that these are robots that can move in a plane. These are their initial configurations, and then we saw the expression for the 2 control inputs in the earlier slide, and then when we choose those parameters in a particular way, only based on local interaction, the behavior of the robots appears this way. So these are like very beautiful geometric patterns that are formed by the motion of the robots in 2D space. And I have not selected beta 1 and beta 2 in a particular way. Of course, in this case, so they're randomly chosen values. I've chosen them as random integers. I just chose them because of what I thought these patterns were aesthetic enough. If you choose different values of beta 1, the consensus matrix, you will find completely different patterns. So they just, I just thought they were an interesting problem when we first started looking at this this particular exercise. But then we find that there are many theoretical challenges that are present when we want to implement this with actual robots and actual systems. The main one is, how do you avoid collisions in the plane? So like in the previous case, we were able to avoid collisions because we did not have any path constraints on the robots. But here the robot has to maintain that particular path. Like I'm sure you've all seen the Rangavalli patterns drawn in front of our houses. Now, imagine if they were improperly drawn, they would not be aesthetic at all. So as the robot is forming these geometric patterns, it has to stick to that path. It can't go to the left or the right. It can't deviate to the path and then come back. Then it won't be tracing that particular pattern. So when you have several robots that are performing these patterns in the plane, how do you ensure that they don't collide with each other while ensuring that they retain on the that they are on the path defined by the geometric pattern? We did try to come up with some heuristic behavior on collision avoidance. So we said that maybe we can start the robot. We can get one of them to stop while another robot completes its path while it's in its vicinity, or we can get it to move back along the path by a few steps. But so far we have not had any formal guarantees on how we can propose a collision avoidance algorithm in this particular problem. So when we actually, again, some technical details here. So as I said, when we expand this particular expression for the control input, we see that the inputs are again based only on local interactions. So there is no central system that is actually telling the robot that it has to follow these particular inputs. So they're all based on local interactions. And on analysis, we find that there are trajectories in the time domain. So this is along X and Y directions. So they're all periodic. And it's the choice of this diagonal matrix B that actually decides the natural frequencies of this periodic trajectory. And we had some intuition that depending on some of the like you saw in the geometric pattern that there could be loops. So we find that many of the collisions happen when a robot loops around a particular path and then comes back to a particular origin. We find that many of the collisions happen there. And so we are trying to work towards uh, coming up with some collision avoidance algorithms based on the sort of trajectories that are that have been selected. Again, more than welcome to pitch in with ideas. You can write to me or my colleagues, and we'll be happy to take it forward. So later on, of course, we came up with a dirty fix for this to show for experimental results, and this is something that I'll show you a little ahead. Okay, so that was a slightly different problem. So now we'll look at the main consensus problem when you have malicious agents. Of course, even here we can say that maybe one of these agents become malicious. It draws its own pattern. How would the other ones do it? I don't know. This is something that that will require a little more effort and a little more work. So now we'll come back to the main consensus problem. So we have all these agents with dynamics. We have to select their input so that their states all have the same value. So this is the main basic consensus problem. But what we say is that what happens if some of the agents are malicious? Now, how do we define what is a malicious agent? Again, people working in the computer science domain have formal definitions for this, and we use exactly the same definition. So we define a malicious agent as one which sends some value of its state to its neighbors, but then it applies a completely different input altogether. A Byzantine agent, again, has a different definition. And then there are some subtle differences between an agent that is malicious and that is Byzantine. Now the question is, we have this network of multi-agent systems. Some of them become malicious, but can we guarantee consensus amongst the other cooperating agents, even though this may send out some junk value, or it may, because it's malicious, it does what it wants, right? But can we still guarantee consensus amongst the other cooperative agents? So can we come up with a consensus protocol that will say that all the other cooperative agents will reach consensus even in the presence of such malicious agents? So these are again some technical definitions on what is a resilient consensus protocol. So we need to have the agreement condition saying that the state should be the same. There is an important validity condition which states that the states of the trajectory as they evolve in time. Again, remember, we are looking at dynamic agents where their values could change with time. Their trajectories have to be confined to the convex hull of their initial conditions. Okay, so this validity condition is what we exploit in order to come up with a consensus protocol by which we can actually identify malicious agents. So a consensus protocol is one that guarantees this validity condition. So if the like let's say we look at scalar agents with first order dynamics, maybe their initial conditions are all between 0 and 1. What this means is that the trajectories, after the consensus protocol is applied, and even at the consensus value, they always are constrained to lie within 0 and 1. This can of course be extended to higher dimensions as well. Now, in order to exploit this particular fact of what a resilient consensus protocol is supposed to do, we propose a law, a consensus protocol that says that we can identify malicious agents as long as this property is satisfied. So if a malicious agent is one, if it sends a state that does not lie in the convex hull, then we immediately disregard it. And this does not seem so unrealistic. I don't know why someone would hack into an agent and then send a value that is maybe agreeable to everybody. You would want to hack into a system and then make the whole multi-agent system unsafe. Maybe there are applications where such minor deviations can happen because of external attacks, but this can be considered to be like an extreme attack on a particular agent, which simply says that just send out some value so that the entire multi-agent system may reach some unsafe behavior. So we are able to identify malicious agents that satisfy this particular property. And so how are we able to do that? So that's where we come up with the sliding mode control algorithm. Again, I'm not going to give you too many technical details here, but suffice to say that the properties of sliding mode ensure that the convex hull properties are satisfied even in the transient state. And we are able to use this to guarantee consensus even in the presence of malicious agents. Again, we say that the cooperative agents don't know if their neighbors are malicious or not, but they're able to identify it if this condition is satisfied. So suppose it receives the state information from its neighbor. which does not satisfy this property, then it can say that it is malicious. Again, there are some hidden assumptions here. All the agents need to know what the initial conditions of the other agents are. Uh, so these are your classical trade-offs between what should be the knowledge possessed by each agent in order to reach consensus. Do we say that this is more crucial than saying I'm going to maybe make the graph more robust one? So there the assumptions are that an agent would know an upper limit on the number of malicious agents that are there. So it's basically a trade-off between what assumptions we make and what information that a cooperative agent is expected to know before it applies a consensus protocol. So here we say that a cooperative agent, all cooperative agents know their initial conditions or know their working conditions, and they're able to identify malicious agents if it sends data that is outside this operating condition. So this paper was again published as an extended abstract this year. We still have to prepare the camera ready paper and so on, but we still have some time for that. Yeah, so again, some more technical discussion. So how do we come up with a consensus protocol mathematically? So we use the properties of the graph. So it could be so here we define what is a Laplacian matrix. Again, graph theorists will be familiar with these notations. This is a degree matrix and an adjacency matrix. And we use the properties of this Laplacian. The Laplacian matrix is positive definite, positive semi-definite. It has one eigenvalue, which is identically 0. And then we use this to come up with a consensus protocol. So the the graph that I've shown you here, the Laplacian matrix of this looks like this. So for example, if you look at the fourth row, which is that of agent A4, it has 6 in its diagonal in the diagonal row and -1 throughout. So this is because agent 4 is connected to all other agents in this particular network. You can see that it's connected to all of them. So the number of agents that it is connected to, that's a degree matrix, that is 6. And the adjacency matrix basically denotes -1. If it is connected to that particular agent. So the location in this matrix will say whether these two agents are connected or not. Again, we have some, there is actually a typo here. This 2 should appear in the diagonal. Again, we exploit the properties of this Laplacian matrix. And then this is the consensus protocol that we propose. So we say that this is a sliding mode based consensus protocol. So we define what is known as a sliding manifold, which uses the row of each row of the Laplacian matrix. X is, of course, a vector of states of all other agents that each agent receives. And each agent applies the same protocol in order to reach consensus. Of course, the malicious agents can do whatever they want, but the cooperative agents, if they apply this and they're able to identify the malicious agents, then it's guaranteed that they reach consensus within a finite time interval. So here I have some simulation results that basically show some behavior. So here we have 6 or 7 agents. As you can see here, they apply the consensus protocol. So initially they're all cooperative. They apply the protocol, and then within a finite time interval, you can see that they all reach the same state value. So y-axis is basically the magnitude of the state. They were all initially randomly chosen between 0 and 1. So then they finally reach this consensus value. And what happens if 2 of them, the 2 agents that I'd shown you in the graph before, what happens if 2 of them are hacked after a certain time interval? What happens if they become malicious after all other agents have reached a consensus? So the sliding mode protocol that we propose guarantees that the agents which are in consensus continue to remain that way, even though even though 2 of them have become malicious and then start sending out some information to its neighbors and also apply some other input. So we're able to guarantee some of this behavior. And then here we have a simulation where we have malicious agents that actually send states that lie within that convex hull. I mean, within the convex hull, outside the convex hull, again, is a binary condition. What happens if you have 2 of them that do send out states that lie within the convex hull? Then what happens is that the consensus value that is reached by the cooperative agents is actually now decided by the values of the state values transmitted by the malicious agents themselves. So in a way, the malicious agents can decide what the consensus value is going to be, as long as they transmit values that lie within the convex hull. Whether this is acceptable or not is debatable, but but the proposed algorithm, again, as I said, does not require any assumptions on the graph topology. It does not say that these are the minimum number of connections that an agent has to have, or it doesn't say that an agent needs to know that there are so many malicious agents in the network and so on. So again, it's a question of what assumptions are preferable over others. So these are our first steps in coming up with some control algorithms that deal with concepts from computer science, mainly malicious and Byzantine agents. Again, there are many problems that can be looked at here. We looked at first order agents. What if you have second order dynamics or higher order dynamics? What happens if we have different types of other consensus protocols? Can we come up with variants? There are also some interesting problems in clock synchronization. Maybe some of you are familiar with clocks and the dynamics of clocks. There have been some, what I mean by clock here is a crystal oscillator, basically, which has to oscillate in order to give out a particular clock signal. So there are some very interesting dynamics there. So can we again come up with some protocols for those types of dynamics? As you know, a clock can have a slew, and there's another parameter, the word doesn't come to mind right now. Some of these parameters can again be different for different clocks. How do you still ensure synchronization amongst these clocks, even in the presence of different parameters? So in a way, the agents are not homogeneous. They have different parameters. How do we still guarantee consensus when these parameters are different? So again, many different types of problems in the broader consensus area. Okay, so that's enough about the theory. So now let me spend some time on the robotics studio that we have in the Minro Center. So those of you who have not come, who have not seen this before, so this is in the first floor of the Ramanujam block in the institute. So this is a cage which is basically an indoor tracking system. So what you see here is a camera mounted 4 in the corners and then 2 on each of these pillars. So they're near infrared cameras that can track the position of these 2 robots that we have. So these are the drones. We have 3 drones and we have about 5 ground robots. And each of them, I hope you're able to see these small gray spheres that are mounted on each of these robots. So they're actually they're coated with a material that reflects near infrared light. So and they're mounted in a very unique location for each of these robots, so that the indoor tracking system can detect the position and orientation of the robot within this environment. This is maybe about 20 feet by 20 feet, roughly that big. It may seem very restrictive for now. What can we do in such a small space? But again, there are many problems that we've been able to identify, which are again quite challenging in working with these constrained environments. And again, there are many things that can be done here. So this mobile robot has a Kinect RGB depth sensor, which can be used for to estimate the. I mean, you can apply image processing algorithms on them in order to navigate the robot to different locations. The drones themselves have 2 cameras. There's a forward-facing one, and there's also a downward-facing camera, which can again be used for navigation or other identification tasks. So this is an overview of the robotic studio that we have in the Minro Center. All programming to each of these robots is done through MATLAB and Simulink. Again, I don't expect you to look at this very carefully, but just to say that these are very involved programs. So many of them have come from the company that we acquired the system from. This is Quanza, which is a Canadian company. So they've provided us the basic programming environment in order to get the drones up and flying and the robots to move within the indoor environment. And what we do is we build upon these. We write our own programs, write our own Simulink models, either to do navigation or collision avoidance, or I'll show you the few demonstrations in order to perform all these operations. Again, there are many things that can be done, but what I particularly like about this system is the data acquisition system that we have. So each of the robots and the drones have again fairly sensitive sensors, inertial measurements units, gyroscopes, for the drones. And of course, the indoor tracking system itself gives the data. So the data is available at a very high sampling rate. So as control engineers, we need this data in order to be able to tune either our control algorithms or to propose new collision avoidance algorithms, or any such work that we have to do is dependent on data. Otherwise, we won't be able to quantify whether what we've done works or not. So the system allows us to log data at a very high rate. Many floating point variables can be logged, and they're saved as a mat file. We can do analysis using well-known methods. So I should take this moment and acknowledge the guys who work in the robotics studio. So from left to right, this is Vaibhav, Yash, Saffron, and Wayne. So these are guys who've been working with me in the robotics studio for quite some time, and say sometimes it can be quite a bit of effort in getting these things to work. For instance, we spent 10 days before we realized that there was an IP address issue in one of the robots. All we had to do was change some IP address and everything began to work. So you should commend their patience at this time. So this is my last slide where I have some videos. So this is the first one that again is a collision avoidance algorithm, but with a limited field of view. So again, all the videos that I'm going to show you here are experimental data. So none of this is simulation. So all this is acquired using the robots that you just saw in the robotic studio. So here we have, so there are 3 robots that are again moving in the 2D plane. Each of them, it'll go on. So I'll explain some of the concepts to you. So you see these small circles here. So the robots have to navigate to these target points while avoiding each other. So the difference between these two experimental results is, of course, in this case, the robot has a limited field of view. So it can only see in front. It can't see what is behind it, or it doesn't have a 360-degree view. But here the robots have a 360-degree view. So what I'd like you to focus on is the trajectories of the blue and the green robots in both these graphs. The red one really doesn't matter because it's not on the collision path of any of them. But here you can see that when there's a limited field of view. So this is a new algorithm that we are currently working on. So the paper is preparation is under progress. So I don't want to disclose any results at this stage. Hopefully when we get a publication out, then it'll be ready for everyone to see. So all I can say right now is that the algorithm would cause the paths of the robots to deviate much more when they have limited field of view than when they have an all-around view. Again, this is quite intuitive. If I know everything around me, maybe I can take a little more risk and then move in a particular way. So here again, we have modified the hybrid reciprocal velocity algorithm and considered these limited field of view constraints. So again, these are fairly early. We do have some theoretical guarantees on how this works and what are the other assumptions that we would have to make in order to get this algorithm to work. So again, this is experimental data. Okay, this is not simulation. This is experimental data, and this is the data that is acquired from MATLAB. Of course, I've just drawn them, put them in animation, and then drawn them like this. But this is actual experimental data that is obtained from the vision tracking system for each of the robots, which is then processed and presented in this way in MATLAB. Okay, so that was the first one. The next one is this is what I was telling you about the patterns. Maybe if some of you have muted your speakers, just out of curiosity, I suggest you maybe unmute your speakers, or if you can at least listen to the sound in the audio. This is just for you to show the noise that the drones make when they fly within the indoor studio. So this is something that always fills us with some enthusiasm when we come to the studio and then we hear these drones fly. You know, the sound they make means that something that we have done is correct. Again, the environment, the programming environment, the data acquisition environment is very robust. So it's not that we are completely groping in the dark, because there's very high fidelity data that is available. We know exactly where to debug. We know exactly what could have gone wrong. Is it a logic issue? We can log all these variables. We can put some scopes that display some variables in real time that tell us if there is an internet issue. So they're a very robust system that we have. And yeah, so this is a pattern formation algorithm. So you remember those the slide that I showed you on robots forming patterns. So again, as I said, we took a dirty way out, and then we said we're going to make 3 robots move in 3 different planes. So there is no problem of collision. So here, what we see here is we have a ground robot, and we have 2 drones. So each of them is going to operate in its own plane. But but the video that you will see here will show you the geometric pattern that is ultimately traced by each of these robots. Let me just start. So this is the sound that is made by them. The drones themselves have a flying time of about 10 minutes. The mobile robots can, of course, move for longer. So this is the beginning of the pattern formation part. I'll just show you what you should focus on. So this is again the XY position of the 2 drones and the robot as obtained with experimental data. If you were to just see the robots and the drones fly, you'll at least I was not, neither my colleagues nor I were able to make any sense of what these things are actually doing. So what I'd like you to do is follow at least the blue circle, the blue square on the graph. So the blue square on the MATLAB graph actually corresponds to the motion of the ground robot, and the green and the red are of the other 2 drones. So you can get a sense of what these robots are doing by following the blue line and the ground robot simultaneously. So because we're getting them to fly on 3 different planes, there is no collision issue. But the graph that you see here is the projection of the 2D coordinates on the plane. And so this is the path that is now followed by each of the robots. Again, keep an eye out on the blue circle and the ground robot. So this is the periodic. So this is the trajectory in the XY plane that is traced by the 2 drones and the mobile robot. And again, the only input parameters here was that B matrix that I had shown you in that particular consensus algorithm. So these have again very formal geometric properties, both in time and in space. These can be characterized by, again, I hope I'm not saying it incorrectly, trochoids, epitrochoids, and so on. So they can be characterized by these geometrical entities. And this, again, the values that you see here, both the initial configuration and the beta matrix were chosen randomly. If we had chosen a different value of them, a different pattern would have been traced. So anyway, again, I hope you were able to view both the graph and the robot simultaneously to get a sense of what these are actually doing. Okay, so that was the first demonstration on pattern formation. I have 2 more videos. Yeah, so this is a coverage problem. This is something that we had in discussion with a company that was that wants to get into the agri-tech space. So again, some of you who may be working in the agri-tech space, which use drones, you know that people have been using these drones to capture images of cropping patterns or plantations in order to maybe diagnose their health. And there are companies that are actually doing this as a service. It's a fairly established service routine. But from what I heard, at least from the provider that we spoke to, so currently they're using only 1 drone in order to cover a particular area. and they also fly at a particular they also fly at a fixed height. So if the land that is being surveyed, or where the crops are being studied, if it has undulating patterns, then the images that are captured the by the drones would be a different altitude. So one of the problems that we thought we could propose was, can we get the drone, for instance, to follow the profile of the land? If we had say contour maps of the land, then we could use this information in order to come up with a 3D profile of the flying path of the robots, of the drones, so that you can guarantee that the images that they capture of whatever it is that they're surveying is from a constant height. But the video that I'm showing you here is of a coverage problem, where we are trying to say, can we get two drones to now cover the same area? Now, so in this case, how do we can we come up with some techniques by which we can define the paths of these drones, so that in minimum flying time they're able to cover as much area as possible? This is standard area coverage problem. Of course, things become a little more complicated when we consider these dynamic bodies, because these would be flying in the open environment. You have gusts of wind, and you have all these environmental disturbances, and we have to, of course, compensate for them. So they're very interesting academic problems when you look at coming up with some optimal trajectories that consider these dynamics, and maybe even some classes of disturbances. So here, we just chose an ad hoc coverage pattern. There is absolutely no science or basis to how this was selected. We just selected this to actually make it look good on a graph. That was our only motivation. So here we have the two robots which are confined to their own working environment. So again, the blue corresponds to the one drone, the red is of course the other one, and then you can see that each of them is following an infinity shaped pattern. So the area coverage problem is, now can we come up with these trajectories so that the area that is being surveyed uh, can be increased within as small a flying time as possible. So again, as I told you, the battery life of some of these drones are very limited. Of course, since this is in a lab studio, we barely get about 10-12 minutes of flying time. Even the best quadrotor, commercially available quadrotor, does not give more than 30 minutes of flying time. So maybe if we can propose solutions that come up with different trajectories that are able to save power or increase flying time while maximizing the task at hand, then I think there would be interesting problems to look at. So again, I'd like to acknowledge the Karnataka government for their support in establishing this center, and I'll just leave you with this small video. Yeah. We hope you enjoyed seeing the demonstration videos in the metro facility we have here at IIITB. This lab was made possible with support from the government of Karnataka. We hope you visit us and choose to work with us on your research problems and other interests. That's pretty much all I have. I'm open for questions and discussions. Yeah, thanks very much indeed.
Thank you, Sachin. That is a great talk. A big hand.
Thank you.
Yeah. So there are a few questions on the chat, and all of them are from Prasanna.
Okay. So these questions seem to be more on the swarm collision problem. What are the algorithmic trade-offs? This was in the shape formation algorithm. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, all I'm asking is basically how fast can the center of mass and the swarm breadth move. It's essentially shows the agility of the algorithm.
No, so that is decided.
How agile the robots are individually.
Exactly, that is decided by the individual dynamics. And of course, if we expect that the swarm has to move as a single entity, then again there are communication issues. Like each of them has to exchange information with each other, and only then can the swarm move. So maybe I don't know at this point what would be the bottleneck or what would be the weakest link in the chain.
Professor Sachitra.
Yeah.
This is Ramesh here. Very fantastic presentation. Thank you so much. I have one question, need from the interactions from the power grid people. So there is a need for them to do power line inspection.
Okay.
Or beyond line of sight inspection, because power lines beyond line of sight is an issue for them. If we can do vision-based detection of power lines and then following the power lines, that would be an interesting problem to work upon. So
yeah, I think it can be done. So one of my current master's students is actually working on the visual servoing problem.
Okay.
So where we look at controlling the robot purely based on the images captured by the camera.
Okay.
So there is no trajectory, or there are no coordinates that are, say, defined in a GIS application which the drone has to track.
Yeah.
But it should be possible to track purely based on vision feedback. So it's indeed possible. But we again have some simulation results for very simple objects in uncluttered environments. But I think it'll be a challenge when we look at power lines. How do you detect them? And
we have done some work initially on detecting power lines from static images.
Okay.
We can use those detection as inputs to your control algorithm. And again, this would be an elevation model issue. It has to whatever terrain hugging type of
exactly.
algorithm.
It has to follow the contour traced by the power lines. Yeah, I agree. It's a bit of a challenge.
I will connect with you offline on that.
Sure. More than welcome. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Okay, so Sachit, I have a question.
Yes, please.
These robots you mentioned are moving in different planes, right? So is that
are you talking about the pattern video that I showed?
Yes.
Okay.
So they are moving in different planes. Is that a constraint imposed by you?
Yes.
Is it a constraint on the robots?
No. It's a constraint that we imposed because we still don't know how to avoid planar collisions.
Okay.
Like if all the robots are moving on the same plane and you saw the trajectories there, right? Maybe they loop around and then they come back. So right now we are working on how do we come up with algorithms or rules by which these collisions are avoided. We have some initial results, but I mean they're not as rigorous as I like them to be. So we are working on that.
So do you use some kind of 4-dimensional mechanics to do that? Because of course time also has to be considered, right? So time and 3D space for the flying drones, and for the ground robo you just need 3D, right?
So see, for us in the I mean, when we look at the path planning, for us time is always a parameter. So so when we write differential equations, time automatically comes in.
Okay.
So in the programming environment that we have, we only need to generate a trajectory either in time or spatially.
Right.
So the coverage problem that we said, we gave it a sequence of points which are separated in time. And it says go from this coordinate to this coordinate, maybe take like 5 seconds to go here, then 5 seconds to go to the next one, and so on.
Right.
So for us, these are naturally programmed.
Okay. So right now, are you looking at any collision detection algorithms, or is that something that you have to work on in future?
No, we do have some initial work that is done on that, but we have to continue with that. We got stuck up in writing other papers and other issues. So we haven't looked at that in a few weeks now. But yeah, we do have some insights and some ideas on where these collisions happen, what can be done to maybe get the robots to fly. Again, the dirty fix was to get them all to fly in different planes.
Okay, I understand. As you mentioned, it's I mean, you had to figure that part out, right?
Yeah.
So I'm just curious about one more thing. So in graphics, we do have collision detection when it comes to animation and all of that. So we do use bounding boxes to figure out, and we figure out if the bounding boxes themselves collide. So is that something that is routinely used in?
Yeah. So what I was telling you about the like each robot is bounded by a circle of a particular radius that is equivalent to your bounding box.
Okay.
So we use the geometric property of that circle that is actually used in the HRVO algorithm, which is the main collision avoidance algorithm.
Right.
So we use that geometric property, and then there is all this Minkowski sum and all these properties that are being computed. So there are some geometrical operations that are performed, which will basically tell the new velocity, both the speed and the heading angle of each of the robots to move so that they can avoid the collision. So we do use the some geometric property of the robots themselves.
Okay. Okay. And in robotics, do you have, I mean, so there's this notion of the bounding box itself, there are different variations, right? So
Yeah.
as you mentioned, if it's the spherical, is it a compact one, or it gives some kind of, I mean, you have to decide some kind of leeway so that there is, you account for the aliasing in time, right? As in, you know that within certain, say, a step in time, a collision is bound to happen or not, right?
Okay.
So are these kind of things, I mean, so what I'm trying to ask is that something that comes with the robo, saying that it's as per the design of the robo, depending on
No. These are our attributes to it.
Okay, so you regulate, you control all of those.
Yeah. So the
things
robot by itself,
programmatically. Okay.
the robot by itself does not know anything. All it comes with is a bunch of sensors and actuators.
Okay.
And maybe it has right now the robots that we have, they come with their own power electronics modules, so we don't actually have to go to the level of voltage and current to regulate
Okay.
them. So we do things at the kinematics level, but by themselves they're pretty dumb creatures. All they have is a bunch of sensors and actuators, and we have to give it attributes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think I'm done with my questions. Any other questions anybody has? Thanks, Sachin. I think
Thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you so much for the nice presentation, the video demonstrations. Yeah,
Yeah.
a lot of
We hope-
exciting work at Menro.